Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great honor to rise today to speak to motion M161, and I'd like to thank the member for St. John Rothesay for bringing this motion forward. The motion before the House today, Mr. Speaker, is asking that this House give direction to the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security, basically to examine the record suspension program. It wants to do several things. It wants to examine the impact of a record suspension and its ability to help those with a criminal record to reintegrate to society, look at and examine the impact of criminal record suspension fees and additional costs associated with the application process, especially for low-income applicants, and identify maybe what the appropriate fees and service standards might be for those record suspensions, and also identify improvements to better support applicants for a criminal record suspension. Now, a lot of what this motion, the topic that's covering, the topic of record suspensions, I think we have to sort of roll back a little bit and look at what the previous Conservative government did, and especially looking at what it did with its raising of the costs of pardons. At one time, they cost $50 to do. That rose to $150 and then climbed up to an astonishing $651. Now, if we look at the corrections system, and I have to underline that word, Madam Speaker, corrections system, because ultimately what our goal in the entire judicial system, the criminal system, is that we want people who have served their time, who have paid their debts to society, and who have demonstrated good behavior. I think it's in our society's interest to help those people fully reintegrate society, and that means getting a job, having the ability to travel, having the ability to rent an apartment, because we want to reward good behavior. And you know, there are some statistics. I know there has been some fear-mongering in this place with regards to, you know, siding with the person who's guilty of a crime over the victims. This has nothing really to do with that, because we're talking about someone who has been released from the prison system. They have paid their debt. They have made their amends to a victim of their crime. And furthermore, when they become eligible for what was once called a pardon, or what we now call a record suspension, they have actually had to wait 5 years, and in some cases 10 years, demonstrating to the Parole Board of Canada that they have basically committed no crimes, that they have lived a good life, and that they have followed the rules. So by waiting that time, by demonstrating that they are willing to make amends for what they have once done, they are then eligible to apply for a record suspension, and if granted, the record is set aside. It is not completely wiped out. It basically just sets it aside. It does not get rid of it, but it can be of great assistance to someone who is trying to reintegrate their lives. And you know, I don't think we should hold people accountable for the mistakes they made in their past for their entire life. I think it's within us to forgive. It's within us to recognize someone who has taken responsibility for the crime they have committed, who has paid their debt, and who has demonstrated a sincere willingness to move on and to try and become a better person. And also, you know, according, Madam Speaker, to the Parole Board of Canada, 96% of pardoned Canadians never reoffend and are less likely to commit a crime than the average Canadian. And this statistic actually comes prior to when the previous Conservative government brought in its great restrictions allowing Canadians access to pardons. Now let me talk about the $631 fee. You know, a lot of people in communities across this country, and I know the member for St. John Rothesay talked about this in his speech back in May, they suffer from debilitating poverty. They are looking at the day-to-day necessities of trying to keep a roof over their head, of trying to find out where their next meal is going to come from. And, you know, some of them do have criminal records. They either have suffered from trauma in their past, which has led them to commit crimes. They suffer from substance abuse, which unfortunately still has a criminalized approach to it. It's unfortunate, in fact, that when we have countries around the world like Portugal, where a decriminalization approach for small possession of drugs has met with such success that we cannot take that evidence and apply it here in Canada. But nevertheless, the point I'm trying to make is that people who would greatly benefit from accessing a record suspension are often people who are the lowest rungs of our society. They are already suffering so much. And to put a $651 barrier in front of them is just cruel and unusual punishment in my regard. It seems to me like we're kicking someone who's already down. And, you know, $651 may not sound like a lot of money, but to a person who is living on social assistance, who needs to have rental supplements, who needs to go and visit the food bank, $651 is an absolute fortune. And Madam Speaker, if they're ever able to acquire such a sum, they are certainly not going to spend it on trying to get a record suspension. It's going to go to the necessities of life. So I really feel that, you know, when the record suspension program went from $50 to $150 and then up to $651, that really was just striking people when they were already at their worst. Now, what I want to know, and I hope the member for St. John Rothesay will answer this, you know, when he closes this debate down on this motion, is, you know, his government has conducted some studies into the record suspension program. They have sought advice from Canadians, and they are now well past their third year in their mandate. And still, the public safety minister has yet to bring any real reforms to the record suspension program. It makes me wonder whether the Liberals really are all the way behind this, because, you know, the member who brought forward this motion, he sits in caucus with the public safety minister. Surely he has had the opportunity to bring this topic up with the public safety minister to discuss it. And yet still we see no action from the Liberal cabinet. Instead, we are left to a member of the Liberal backbench to bring forward a motion to instruct the Public Safety Committee to conduct a study. And that leads to my next point. So first of all, I'm wondering whether the Liberal government is really serious about moving ahead with reforms. And second of all, why is this House spending a couple of hours debating a motion of instruction when there are 5 Liberals who sit on the Public Safety Committee who could very well have brought this motion forward then and there? I mean, you know, it just seems to me that this is a motion which is not very necessary for this House to be deliberating on, when the Liberal members of the Public Safety Committee could very well have taken the initiative and done it if they were serious about actually implementing the reforms. The clock is running on this Parliament. We are left with about a year until the 2019 election. So it makes me wonder, you know, the Liberals being the masters of the long promise, whether we're actually going to see meaningful reform in the record suspension program within the timeline of this Parliament. So, Madam Speaker, I see my time is running out, but I want to say that, you know, I am going to support this motion. I think that the reasoning behind it is genuine, and that it reflects a desire on the part of the member to see some actual change. And I know he talked very passionately in his speech about the troubles that his constituents are going through. But I question whether the Liberal cabinet is fully behind this, given their lack of action on the program so far, and question as to whether this might have been better served at the Public Safety Committee. But, you know, I really do think, Madam Speaker, that, you know, it's a pretty cumbersome application process that is costly. It does not allow the lowest rungs of society who do have criminal records that easy process for getting forward in life. And I think it's within our society's interest to reward those who have demonstrated good behavior and a dedicated willingness to reform their ways. I think also, if you look at Canadians, like the Public Safety Minister did launch a consultation, and overwhelmingly the responses by Canadians favored the record suspension fee going down, and for certain offences, low-key offences that were non-violent, maybe drug-related, to have automatic expungement after a certain amount of time if that person has demonstrated a willingness to rejoin society. So, Madam Speaker, I'll end by saying that I will support this motion, and I thank the House for the opportunity to lend my voice to it.
Resuming.